The Nintendo 64 is a console which tends to divide most gamers. Launching back in 1996 as the gaming industry's bread and butter while switching from sprites to polygons, the console represents the first time Nintendo really dropped the ball. Tired of the platform holder's licensing terms, many developers jumped ship to Sony's PlayStation, attracted by fairer deals and cheaper disc-based games. In the meantime, Nintendo doubled down on the esoteric piece of hardware with confusing, bright-coloured controllers that were arguably a little out of step with gaming's aging audience. On the other hand, for many gamers, the Nintendo 64 invokes some of the very warmest and strongest game memories. It was while banishing the console's even three-pronged controller that many of us take our first steps into the three-dimensional gaming world. From the money mushroom kingdoms of Hyrule to the unrivaled excitement of four-player split screen on Mario Kart and GoldenEye, it holds a special place in many of our hearts. Over this short series of videos, we were looking at 50 of the best games ever released for the Nintendo 64 based on user ratings. Today we will look at the final 10 games in the list, ranked number 10 to number 1. Number 10, F-Zero X. User score 8.65 out of 10. Forum wars continue over whether F-Zero X or its successor on GameCube is a superior white-knuckle futuristic racer. The 64-bit entry is metal, pure simple guitar screeching all-out metal. EAD stripped back extraneous detail to achieve the smoothest, most blistering and nail-biting precise racing experience. At this speed, even the tiniest prod of the spindly analog stick matters, and the original 64 pad offers peak precision for micro adjustments which make the difference between gracefully swooping through a corner with barely a pixel to spare, or catching said corner and ricocheting between barriers in an explosive, humiliating retirement. Number 9, Super Smash Bros. User score 8.65 out of 10. At the time, the idea of a platform fighting game without health bars was pretty revolutionary. Instead, as you beat the opponent, you become more vulnerable to knockback from your attacks, with the aim being to knock them out of the arena entirely. Catering for up to 4 players with a simple control scheme and the addition of weapons and power-ups to spice things up, this first Smash was the rock-solid foundation for a series that became one of the world's biggest fighting franchises. The number of combatants and complexity of the Nintendo 64 original may pale in comparison with some later rosters, but we still look back fondly on the very first time we had the opportunity to open a can of whoop-ass on Pikachu. Number 8, Perfect Dark. User score 8.79 out of 10. An incredible follow-up to GoldenEye, which threw in every idea the developers at Rare could muster. Perfect Dark really stretched Nintendo 64 hardware and was arguably the most ambitious game of the console. James Bond was never going to be an easy act to follow, but Joanna Dark's noir-ish sci-fi was a good spiritual successor as you could hope to have. Number 7, Paper Mario. User score 8.84 out of 10. 2 decades on, and Paper Mario might not look as sharp as it once did, but it holds up very well when it matters and jostles with the 1000-year door for the title of the best Paper Mario game. The Nintendo 64 original does very well to ease Mario fans into a new style of adventure, while providing a depth for RPG gamers that you might not expect for the paper-thin premise. With a great supporting cast and buckets of trademark Nintendo charm, the original is up there with the best. Number 6, Star Fox 64. User score 8.87 out of 10. Star Fox 64 originally came in a whopping great box containing a rumble pack that was many gamers' first introduction to force feedback on console. It paired beautifully with the cinematic battles and daring do of Fox McCloud and his team's cinematic dogfighting in this on-rail shooter. It's still an excellent game all these years later, with thrilling action, delicate and precise controls, steering music, humour, spectacle and edge of your seat entertainment. Sure, it's got a surplus of slippery toad, but you can't have everything. Whether you're enjoying it on the original hardware or playing via the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack, a quick blast through this is very clear to see why so many people think the Star Fox series peaked with its first sequel. Number 5, Super Mario 64. User score 8.91 out of 10. The 3D platformer that defined what the label meant. It's remarkable just how much Shigeru Miyamoto and his team got right with his first foray into 3D platforming. It feels effortless, as if these mechanics were somehow self-evident or arrived at through natural evolution. Nintendo absolutely nailed the formula from the very beginning. So much so that the basic 3D template hasn't really changed much even today. We still control Mario much as we first did with a wonderfully odd looking Nintendo 64 controller. Super Mario 64 is available on Switch if you have the time-limited copy of Super Mario 3D All-Stars or part of the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack subscription. And we could go on endlessly about its genre-birthing mechanics, how it set the stage for 3D gaming and as we know it, and blathering on about the infinite amount of tiny details that made this joy to fire up all those years later. But you know about all that. Do yourself a favour and blast yourself a couple of dozen stars next time you're pondering what to play. It still feels almost as good as it did the very first time. Number 4. Banjo-Kazooie. User score 8.94 out of 10. There's something in the precise platforming of fairy tale formula of Banjo-Kazooie that resulted in a quintessential 3D collectathon. It's a big but not sprawling, sweet but not silky, challenging but never unfair. From the roaming grublins to Mumbo Jumbo's latest transformations, its colourful characters and varied worlds are a shot full of humour, adorable animation, tight controls and an on-par music box soundtrack that nails the spirit of the cheeky storybook adventure perfectly. Number 3. GoldenEye 007. User score 9.06 out of 10. Not only was Rare's game hugely influential on the console FPS genre, but it also gave Nintendo 64 owners a proper adult experience to sink their teeth into. At the time when PlayStation was a hot commodity, GoldenEye 007 provided some real ammo in the console wars, and its 4-player deathmatches led to some of the best and potentially first multiplayer memories for many people. Number 2. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. User score 9.11 out of 10. This game had a very mixed response from gamers upon its release. You either hated it or loved it. The 3-day cycle also added a constant pressure that turned off many players. However, that cycle is also key to the unique way Majora's Mask focuses on its cast of uncanny characters and incredible story. The excellent 3DS remake is probably the best way to play these days, thanks to some welcome additions for managing a limited time, although the original is conveniently able to play via the Nintendo Switch Online. However you play, the Clockwork Land of Termina offers something truly unique in the Zelda series. And number 1. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. User score 9.54 out of 10. What is it that hasn't already been said about this one? A seminal video game, Ocarina of Time brought the Legend of Zelda into the third dimension as successfully as the plumber made the leap in Super Mario 64. When Nintendo could throw any style idea into Mario's launch game, Ocarina had to tell a story and invoke a consistent mood throughout. Going back these days, the frame rate and cumbersome menus may surprise you, and Hyrule Field feels decently smaller when compared to the vast kingdom of Hyrule presented in Breath of the Wild. However, the pure magic of the game still shines through in the aging systems. This set the template for not only subsequent Zelda titles, but also the majority of action-adventure games from the past 2.5 decades. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time on 3D and 3DS is a more streamlined version, but there are things that the remake can't quite capture. Whether it's the Rumble Pack powered Stone of Agony or the 64-bit mist hanging over Lake Hylia in the early hours, the Nintendo 64 still has that something special. So that's it. So I hope you enjoyed. Of course, punch like button, leave a comment down below, of course, subscribe to this channel for my Twitter and Instagram links down below as always. And of course, we are partnered with TubeBuddy. First link in the description for YouTube link, tag that's fun, those other good stuff. So that's something that you are interested in and will find helpful, like I did. First link in the description. Trust me, I wonder how you're gonna write it. And of course, so I'll partner on the channel, so when you head down below, hit the join button, support myself and the channel. It'd be greatly appreciated for a who your benefits. But of course, you never have to. But if you don't, you have to subscribe and watch the next video. Okay, thanks so much for watching. I'll be next talk. I'll see you all again very soon.